Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. J. I'm the founder of Generational Health, and I'll be talking about inflammation today. Inflammation is very interesting, and it's actually something that does already or will affect us in the future. So I'll go ahead and get started. Before I dive in, I'd like to tell you more about our organization, Generational Health. It's an organization run by resident physicians of various specialties, as well as medical students. Together, we provide a monthly series of conversations and presentations surrounding various health issues that impact our community. This organization was created following the death of some that were dear to us, in an effort to prevent deaths in other families. If you're with us today, I welcome you and I encourage you to utilize the chat feature for questions and comments throughout any time of this presentation. And then if I could have either Tiandra or Alicia let me know when someone comments or has a question, because I can't see it. Here's a picture of the Generational Health Warriors here. I'm also the founder of Her Brand, so I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. It's a platform and movement that helps to elevate and empower women through education, awareness, collaboration, and connectedness. We have a subscription box. We have Hear Her educational series, and with our social media platform together, we can help you find the product, the person, the piece of information, or even the voice necessary for personal growth. We are currently having a 25% off sale of all merchandise and subscription boxes with this holiday code here. And the website is beherbrand.com. I will go ahead and start our wonderful topic today. I'm actually really excited about this because this is something I'm really passionate about. So what is inflammation? You guys can read, but I'll just read it anyway. Inflammation refers to the body's process of fighting against things that harm it, whether it's an infection, an injury, or toxins, and this is all in an attempt to heal itself. When something damages your cells, your body releases chemicals that trigger a response from your immune system. This is my own personal addition here, but when we talk about injury, many people only think about physical injury, but as it pertains to inflammation, this can also be an emotional injury or a mental injury. We have two different types of inflammation. Acute inflammation, which is sudden, and then chronic inflammation, which is a persisting inflammation that goes on for a long time or it just constantly recurs. Acute inflammation is what we're most familiar with. This is in response to an injury, whether it's a swollen ankle, a sprained ankle, or a cut or a bump on the leg. I'm sure many of you have seen this. This is when you get the redness, the warmth, the swelling, and the pain. Now, the pain is due to the swelling, and the swelling is due to the increased blood flow to that injured site. The increased blood flow is to essentially bring more white blood cells, which is your immune system, to this area to heal it. Chronic inflammation, being the persistent or constantly recurrent inflammation, is when the body continues to release white blood cells and chemical messengers. So at this point, the body feels like it's under constant attack and it just continues to trigger this inflammation, basically screaming for help. So what contributes to chronic inflammation? Many of you probably know of autoimmune disorders such as lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, or multiple sclerosis, where the body essentially attacks itself. It basically loses the ability to regulate inflammation. Other things that contribute is exposures to toxins like pollution or industrial chemicals and even smoking. You can also have untreated acute inflammation, such as an infection or an injury. And then one thing that I'm going to emphasize throughout this presentation is lifestyle. So we'll talk about the role chronic stress plays, excessive alcohol use, lack of exercise, and even diet, which is actually like majority of the cases when we're talking about inflammation. Some common disease states that are associated with inflammation, if you didn't know, chronic pain, we have obesity, hypertension, which is high blood pressure, depression, heart disease, diabetes, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, cancer, Alzheimer's, asthma, arthritis, whether it's osteoarthritis or rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases, which I mentioned before, migraines, seizures, and even acne. Many, if not all of these disease states are associated with elevated CRP levels, which is basically an inflammatory marker. It's unclear whether inflammation causes the disease or if the disease causes inflammation. Either way, they do affect one another and they essentially just kind of worsen each other. Increased levels, as I mentioned before, are associated with this. So I just wanted to put out a disclaimer out there. I'm going to emphasize lifestyle throughout this presentation, but I think it's important when we're considering health and wellness to consider balance. So even though I'm emphasizing lifestyle, I'm not in any way encouraging you not to take any medications that your doctor may prescribe. So just keep that in mind as we go throughout this presentation. I know there's like this huge movement of natural healing, but the truth is natural healing can only do so much for diseases that have exceeded natural disease. So just consider that as we go throughout this presentation. So ways to prevent and or decrease inflammation. As I mentioned before, there is a role and a place in prevention and treating and decreasing inflammation for medications, right? So we have our ibuprofen, we have our steroids for some autoimmune diseases, things like that. Other ways to control inflammation is to control your blood sugars, to exercise, to maintain a healthy weight, to manage stress, to sleep, and then of course, our diet. The first thing I'm going to talk about is stress management and the role that stress plays on chronic inflammation. I think stress is underappreciated, even within the clinical setting for myself. I try to talk about it as much as I can with my patients, but I think that it doesn't get enough attention. It not only affects mood, but it also affects cortisol levels, which in turn causes inflammation. So normally, cortisol itself is a steroid hormone, and many of you may know it in the form of like prednisone, cortisone, like you know how you get the cortisone shots with the joint injections, or dexamethasone, which is actually being used right now for COVID treatment. And healthy amounts is actually an anti-inflammatory treatment, which is why we use it. But when your body continues to produce it, with these elevated cortisol levels, they actually in turn down-regulate these receptors. And so it's left just excessively in your body, and it causes an increase in your blood sugar, it causes weight gain, and an increase in blood sugar and weight gain actually cause more inflammation. So that's why it's really important to control these cortisol levels and to manage stress. Different ways you can manage stress, obviously, is to get rid of whatever is stressing you. And if you can't, do other things such as exercising, meditating, listening to music, taking a nap, or even playing with the pet. The next thing I'll talk about is exercise. So exercise, as we all know, helps us to reduce fat mass. The thing that make us fat is something called adipocyte, which is adipose tissue. The presence of adipose tissue itself causes inflammation. So reducing the adipose tissue, meaning losing weight, will reduce inflammation. Exercise itself also just lowers inflammatory markers. It kind of calms that immune system down so that we're not triggering this chronic state of inflammation. I think walking is one of the exercises that's really underappreciated. So even if you do, like a walk a day for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, for those of you who have Fitbits or Apple Watches, try to get 10,000 steps a day. And for those of you who are just really strong, you can lift weights and squat it out or whatever you want to do. Now I'll go into diet. I know that diet is very important, and we can use diet as medicine, right? The fruits and vegetables just contain so many minerals and just anti-inflammatory effects that we can utilize just by chewing and eating. So I'll go into the components of an anti-inflammatory diet. The important components of this diet would be fats. So I'm talking about our omega-3 fats, our flax, our hemp seeds, chia seeds, walnuts, and fish. Another important component is olive oil. I feel like we had gotten to a point where we were running away from both fat and olive oil, but studies show that these actually reduce inflammation, and they are actually really good for with reducing cardiac disease. Nuts, we have carbohydrates, and not the complex or the refined carbs that you think of in different processed food, rather like whole grains, because they're naturally high in fiber, magnesium, zinc, B vitamins, and vitamin E. Then we have our veggies and fruits. These have the highest concentration of vitamins and minerals, and they're not only protective and anti-inflammatory, but they actually fill you up. We have protein, for example, like legumes. Tend to stay away from red meats. Red meats are not really good for you, but another source of protein is fish. And within the fish class, we like to avoid those that are high in mercury. So things like shark, swordfish, golden bass, or king mackerel. Aim for like tilapia or anchovies or wild salmon. So when you're searching for different types of fish, just make sure it's wild caught. Next, we have red wine. So this has been proven to decrease inflammation, cardiovascular disease, and even all-cause mortality. And I'm not saying drink an entire bottle. The recommendation is generally 150 mils for women and then 300 for men. They get a little bit more for whatever reason. Lastly is cocoa. And this would be your dark chocolate. So just make sure that it's actually dark chocolate. Practice reading the labels on foods, making sure that the sugar content is not high. Antioxidants. So antioxidants are substances that protect your cells against free radicals, which may play a role in heart disease, cancer, and other diseases. So these free radicals are molecules produced when your body breaks down food or when you're exposed to stuff like tobacco, smoking, or radiation. Antioxidants prevent unwanted inflammatory responses from occurring in the first place. And then they also help restore inflammatory processes. So different sources of antioxidants would be your dark chocolate, your pecans, your berries, your artichokes, kale, and green tea. Foods to avoid would be your sugar. I'm not talking about like the natural sugar that isn't within fruits or anything, but that refined sugar, that processed sugar that's added to make food. As I mentioned before, we want to avoid red meats. We want to avoid any processed meat. So that's your deli meats, any meat that has gone in a grinder and came out as a chicken nugget. We want it, the fresh slab of meat. Avoid saturated fats. So if you can sit it out in trans fats. So if you have a fat and you can sit it out like a butter in room temperature and it solidifies and it becomes a solid, and it's not healthy for you. Also avoid omega-6 fatty acids, refined carbs, as I mentioned before, MSG. Gluten, I feel like if you have a gluten sensitivity, absolutely avoid it. If you don't have a gluten sensitivity, you should be safe. You can avoid dairy products, aspartame, which is in the artificial sweeteners, and then excessive alcohol. You can still have your 150 ml or 300 mils if you're a man daily. I wanted to talk about nightshade vegetables and shine light on this because there's talk out there that this may be bad for you. At baseline in a healthy person, these vegetables, white potatoes, eggplants, bell peppers, tomatoes, are not bad for you. However, if you have underlying inflammation, they may trigger the underlying inflammation. So they're just like the messenger, like, hey, this is going on. So I'm not saying this for you guys to, I'm not encouraging you to become extreme and completely avoid them, but rather just eat them in moderation. If you are experiencing inflammation or if they do trigger them, you can try the elimination diet to either eliminate them or reduce them completely, but just do what your body feels. So all of this talk about,
we have a few comments in the chat, and just wanted to let you know,
sure.
Especially when you're talking about the nightshades and then the other foods that you mentioned, and with your cute meme that says "Don't shoot the messenger." We're understanding everything that you're telling us to maybe avoid as avoiding the good stuff. Can you speak to that?
What do you mean? Wait.
So it's like you want us to avoid everything that tastes good and that we enjoy. So what do? The tasty stuff, Reese
Right.
said.
So are we talking about this year?
I mean, any of it. Even when you go to Nightshades. So Reese says yes. The last slide.
Okay. So even when I go into Nightshade, like I was saying, I wasn't saying avoid Nightshade vegetables, but if it does trigger underlying inflammation, then you should eliminate it. And so the Nightshade vegetables are the 4 vegetables at the top. And you can see these arrows going down as I guess suggestions for substitutes. So if you're a lover of white potatoes, try sweet potatoes or try cauliflower. If you're a fan of eggplant, try mushrooms and okra as a substitute, and so on, based off the picture. As far as a diet goes, so like the healthiest diet, I have that on my next slide for the best and most studied diet. So I'll proceed with that slide, and then if that doesn't answer the question, then we can move on. Is that okay? Or then we can address it. Is that okay?
Yes, because Erica says she hates everything on this slide.
Oh,
so
wow.
please address it.
Erica. Okay. So the Mediterranean diet is actually the most studied and the best diet out there. So as you can see at the top, I feel like our American nutrition diet is just all wrong and screwed up, and that's just an entire other conversation. But at the top of this pyramid, you have meats and sweets. So I'm not saying like completely eliminate it, which I guess I did say avoid. I should have said limit, but limit your meats and sweets. Next would be your poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt. You can have a little bit more of that. Increase your fish and seafood for those omega-3 fatty acids, and then just eat a ton of fruits and vegetables. Then at the bottom, we have physical activity and enjoying meals. When considering this food pyramid or Mediterranean diet pyramid, it's important to remember that portion control is important. So excess calories, regardless of the source of how good it is, can contribute to obesity, which itself produces inflammation. So just keep that in mind as we eat these healthy foods. The other important thing is to remember that this is a lifestyle. So while this is a Mediterranean diet, if you guys go out to look up Mediterranean recipes, like you can do that, but you can also just use these same ingredients to cook the same meals that you prefer. You don't have to go all Mediterranean, on us, but you can just try to use these different ingredients. I think studies show that if you make like 2 changes, like, I don't know, add olive oil and then add fish, that already decreases your chances. Like, you don't have to do everything, just start small. Did that answer the question that was at hand?
I think it addressed it. Thank you. And what did you say? How did you grow to enjoy some of these vegetables and fruits that you are suggesting? Was it something that you always enjoyed, or I kind of shared that it may be an acquired taste? Can you maybe speak to that?
Sure. I think you're assuming that I also enjoy it, which I don't, but I am working on it. I think just like years of eating the trash that we've been eating, like we're obviously accustomed to it. And then there's some addiction within the sugar that we've been fed throughout these years and the processed foods. So I would say it's a work in progress for me. And I just challenge everybody, like I said, to just try something small, like try it, chip away at it, make small changes so that you can have this big change.
Yes, and Erica says baby steps, and she shared that she puts beets in juice and it makes it much better. So thank you, Erica.
Thank you, Erica. Other ways to decrease inflammation is to spice things up. So I'm sure some of you have heard of turmeric being anti-inflammatory, and that is like the queen of anti-inflammatory spices. We also have ginger, cinnamon, garlic, cayenne, pepper, cloves. You guys can read the rest. And partly because I can't pronounce that word, ginseng, green tea, and rosemary. So if you just add this to, again, just small changes, add this to your food as you're cooking, and you'll throw in some anti-inflammatory effects. Do have a fun fact. So curcumin, which is found in turmeric, has been shown to be equivalent and pain relief with ibuprofen and diclofenac for like knee osteoarthritis and rheumatoid arthritis. So adding that turmeric can also help with the pain that we have. And as I mentioned before, it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. So I encourage you guys to not to try to follow the diet rather than to incorporate these small changes into your life.
Yes, and Dr. J, something that you mentioned before we've talked about, if you go back to the last slide, with curcumin being similar to ibuprofen in its effects.
Yeah.
I know that you and I are also proponents of essential oils within understanding and working with your physician. The salicylic acid makeup of ibuprofen is also evident in wintergreen essential oil. So in times when you would take ibuprofen, maybe for a knee or an ankle or something musculoskeletal, you can apply wintergreen essential oil because it's similar to ibuprofen.
Would that also be in peppermint? Being a there?
No, it's not the same. It does have an effect, but it's not the same
okay.
chemical compound.
Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to talk about inflammation's role in mood. So negative mood, such as like sadness and anger, is associated with higher levels of inflammation, the inflammatory marker, the CRP, or the high sensitivity CRP. Negative moods signal the body's immune response, and it's like, why wouldn't it? Like if our body feels like it's in trouble or in any danger, then we're going to trigger that immune response to protect ourselves. And reverse inflammation has also been found to affect the brain, reducing motivation, motor activity, potentially contributing to anxiety and depression. And so that's why I kind of harp on stress reduction and then I guess mood management with that. And that goes back to the chicken or egg thing that I told you guys about. We're not sure which one comes first, but I'm pretty sure that they both affect one another. So after hearing about all this, I'm sure we're all wondering how we can decrease inflammation. The best way is to maintain a healthy weight. So if you need to lose weight to get to that healthy weight, then do so. Have a good diet, the diet that I spoke to you guys about, different foods to avoid and then different foods to increase within our lifestyle. Get plenty of sleep. Sleep also decreases the cortisol levels. Exercise regularly, manage stress, and then establish what a PCP for surveillance. Just see a doctor yearly just to make sure everything is going right. Because if something is going on, you would want to catch it early. Obviously, the best treatment is prevention, right? If we never get it, we never have to treat it. So in doing everything that I've mentioned before, we can help to prevent inflammation, but also doing the things that I mentioned before, we can also decrease what's already inflamed. I challenge you all to start in the kitchen. We talked about how food is medicine, and I know that this will play a huge part in preventing and decreasing inflammation. As with any lifestyle change I mentioned before, don't go big, just start small and go slow. Small changes are the foundation of a big change. Here are some sources for you guys. Actually, these are the sources I use. That was for me. But here are some resources for you guys. I know Mark Hyman is like this guru, this inflammation guru. He has a website and he's also on Instagram. He also has books out there. You guys can visit healthline.org, heart.org, or you can visit heartgenerationalhealth.org and reach out to us if you guys have any questions or need any guidance for this. This was a pretty quick presentation. Let's talk. Do we have any questions out there? Any comments, concerns, any suggestions?
Awesome. So we just had a question to see if we could share this PowerPoint for individuals that are looking to use it as a reference when they try to make changes. So we actually have an email address that we can just shoot this PowerPoint over, if that's okay, Dr. J?
Yeah, that's fine. You guys can put your email address in the chat, and then we'll take it down and we'll have it sent to you guys.
For sure. And then feel free to direct message that either to myself or to Alicia Rogers And a question that we asked earlier, based on your presentation, was what's everyone's favorite ways to reduce stress? I think sometimes when we share those ways, we can help exchange different ideas of how we can reduce stress. And Reese shared that she enjoys putting her phone on do not disturb. And I'm like, that's a great one. So maybe that's something we can talk about.
Does Reese want to elaborate?
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people in my life, like my family and friends and whatnot, depend on me for a lot of stuff. But sometimes I just don't have it in me. So being able to do that, to put my phone on do not disturb and not feel guilty about it, was something I had to learn this year.
I think that's big. And just simply establishing boundaries, whether it's a small boundary. Well, actually, that's a pretty big boundary. So establishing boundaries is one, right? So if that is creating stress in your life, you being that point person, then as I mentioned before, the first thing to do with stress management is to try to get rid of the stress or try to limit the stress. And putting your phone on do not disturb absolutely does that.
And I think even before that, we have to be open to identify the stress. Right? Because sometimes that's the first step before we can even know what to eliminate. It's like really sitting with ourselves and maybe journaling or just reflecting and seeing where the stress is coming from. Because sometimes we don't know.
That's very true.
Yeah, I mean, I do that before I even get to that point. Something I also like doing is lessening my response time. I feel like our phones sometimes can become extensions of ourselves. They're always on the other end of our arm or in our hand. And so just really being intentional and allowing myself that space to not have to respond so quickly because it adds to my stress.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else have ways that they manage stress?
Thank you. Yeah. So Erica Vickers actually shares that she enacts a 3 to 5 business day for a response, like a practice for herself is what it sounds like. Erica, can you share a little bit about that?
Sorry, I couldn't get off mute. I'm off mute now though. Yeah, I just don't like to make any commitments for me. Like I'm work, school, side things, everything's going on. So like I think and maybe it's just that my friends or my family understands that that's kind of my response time. And so they're not really expecting things from me. But I've had to have those conversations where it's like, hey, like I'm not gonna respond right away. Like, sorry, like get back to you when I can. And then just being okay with that. So I don't necessarily do not disturb. But I think people that are in my circle or reaching out to me kind of know, like, hey, I'll get back to you when I'm available.
That's great, Erica. Thank you for sharing. And I think that when we do that, and I know that when I see loved ones of mine or people that I interact with do that, like actually Dr. J is really good at saying like, hey, you know, I don't really have the capacity for this, or maybe at this time. I think that when we instill those boundaries or when we see others, that we're encouraging one another to do the same. Absolutely. Right? Like we can see it as respect and be like, okay, I identify them as respecting themselves in this way. That's something that I can enact and do as well. That's a great one.
I agree.
We had another question. It's from Brandy, which I believe is our doula.
And she is.
So she asked, but I think Jeffrica was going to make a comment. So I want to leave space for Jeffrica to do that.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, what I've learned, making healthy and respectable boundaries, not making other people's stuff your stuff. When you used to helping a lot or like just used to serving a lot, you tend to make other people's stuff your stuff, and it can cause stress. So just teaching yourself to make healthy boundaries for what you will do and what you won't do and what you can't do.
I think that's really big and important, especially for like the matriarchs or the patriarchs. the person who's always the person that people go to, and then it's especially big for our empaths, right? So it's important to not absorb these problems or not feel like we have to absorb these problems, and to establish boundaries and to, like you said, know what you can and cannot take on or will and what will not take on.
That's definitely great. And as I don't necessarily identify as an empath, but as someone who cares deeply, just because you don't attach it as your own does not mean that you don't care or that you don't love them. Right. And it also can empower someone to build the muscle to learn to help and advocate for themselves by modeling that as well, by not taking on everything that they share with you or if they confide in you. And that also leaves room to do that when you're healthy and available, because we're only as good and as healthy as and as good as someone else as we're good to ourselves, right? So Kay shares that some physical activity like yoga or just a simple walk really helps them.
Again, I think walking is really underrated and underappreciated. That walk not only keeps you moving, as what Dr. just presented before, the importance of movement and keeping those joints lubricated, but it's also exercise and decreasing inflammation, and it also helps you to clear your head. So I encourage everybody to walk when they can, and even if you can't go outside and walk, I tell my patients about Walk Away the Pounds with Leslie, and it's not just for losing weight. Even if you're not losing weight, still walk. You can walk in place. You can watch that video on YouTube. It's a great way to keep you moving.
It's awesome. And I want to share, as the people that you were referring to earlier, who just like to lift weights and do all this kind of stuff, that it is okay. I used to be in a space where I always wanted to use my exercise as an opportunity to PR and to keep competing and being better at myself. And then it turned into almost like berating myself and forcing myself to again exceed, different, I don't know, not limits, but expectations that I put on myself, which just echoes and mimics what our careers or different areas can do. Sometimes when we realize like there's beauty in active rest, or there's beauty in just simply going outside, and even if we don't want to run or if we're not there yet, like simply walking, be open to if you want to pick up your cadence, or be open if you want to stop and maybe do some yoga, or stop and do some calf raises, or stop and do some lunges. Like just allowing ourselves to flow and go wherever our body leads us is very freeing and stress relieving. And it doesn't have to always have an agenda. Just giving ourselves that time to be present with ourselves is helpful as well. Can I please share Miss Brandy's question?
Yes.
So she asked, does inflammation affect fertility?
So I can speak on it from the hormonal side as it pertains to like PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Increased cortisol levels and increase inflammation can actually make you insulin resistant. And that can throw off your hormonal balance and affect when you ovulate. So I would say in that sense, it absolutely could. As far as like any other effects that it may have, I'm not too sure, but I can get more information on that for you. That's a really good question.
That's currently all of our questions in the chat. Earlier, we had Ms. Robin Vickers give a suggestion and bring up fibromyalgia before you shared the different conditions that are linked to inflammation. Mm-hmm. She offered and shared that condition. Can you speak a little bit to that one in particular?
Yeah, I think fibromyalgia is interesting because I think they're still trying to figure out if it's considered an autoimmune disorder. In my head, it is. It does have something to do with inflammation, because I know that when we give patients like prednisone, it helps with it. I don't know much about fibromyalgia, but I would say that food is medicine. And from my experience with patients and from my experience with a cousin who has it and a friend that has it, I know that diet can definitely play a role in it. So I would encourage you to actually keep a food diary to see if your fibromyalgia is worse on some days, and if it is, go back and figure out what you ate that day or even what you did that day. Also, stress management is very important as it affects inflammation as well, and inflammation being a mediator or affecting or being a cause of fibromyalgia.
Yeah, Miss Robin, I didn't know if you want to share or expound on offering that condition specifically. By all means, you're welcome to.
Hello.
Hi.
Hey, hi, everybody. I just wanted to share. Well, first off, Dr. Ford, I want to thank you for your presentation on pain. It is a syndrome that a lot of people may not understand. If you've not gone through a period where your pain on a level of 1 to 10 is a 15, sometimes you don't understand it. But I really did want you to focus in on fibromyalgia because, as you said, it's been one of those mystery diseases, and it's kind of like the chicken and the egg. They have two schools of thought. Did you get injured first and your body healed 99%? And later on, 1% comes back as fibromyalgia, or did you get some kind of chronic disease like mononucleosis or Lyme disease and you heal 99%, but there's that 1% that doesn't heal and will follow you up later as fibromyalgia. So I really appreciate the things that you shared. And it's just so important that we as strong people try to recognize what we have and research what we have, and while not claiming it, trying to work with it. So I thank you for what you guys are doing.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. Unfortunately, fibromyalgia is a huge mystery, and there's a ton of research that should be and can be done. But I know you personally, and I see you keeping on. And I'm gonna just pray that we can continue to control that fibromyalgia. And I'll pray for you on your days when your 10 out of 10 pain is a 15, because no one should have to live like that.
Hey, thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. Be safe.
Thank you so much, Ms. Robin. I actually wanted to share. I was diagnosed with the autoimmune condition, and it's actually been inflamed as a result of a recent procedure as of late. And what Dr. J shared about our mood and our energy and our emotion and our spirit and our mind and what we surround ourselves with is so imperative and vital in how our bodies react and even heal, and the energy that our bodies possess. And so even just keeping in your mind, for me and my personal faith and philosophy, I always know that I'm whole and healed. And I know that my condition, although at times can be excruciating and can be very interesting. I can show you some pictures of just this week that is just like, what's going on? Trouble walking when I'm someone who loves to run and just ran miles, right? But it's like, it's an opportunity, one, to rest. Sometimes it's my body communicating to me, maybe that I've overdone it, or maybe there's just something that I can gain if I just sit down for a moment. And it's something that I can gain that maybe if I just rest and sleep and shower and just be very intentional about what's going on within myself. Sometimes it can direct my energy to myself when I'm always so concerned in searching for ways to serve others. Another thing is, there's times when my inflammation is off the charts and I'll break out in hives and have swelling here and there. And I found sometimes when I remove the mirror and I take my focus off of it, that it can give my body and those places that are inflamed an opportunity to heal themselves. And a practice that has just actually come to me, it's kind of like if you take care of plants maybe in your home, and sometimes our plants get too much attention and too much water to where they can't survive and thrive. And then sometimes they're neglected and they don't get what they need. Just being very intentional about listening to each component of our body, knowing that each component of our body is very necessary to the whole, and that we're grateful for it and what it does and adds to our experience as human beings and what we bring to the table, and just honoring that part of ourselves and our bodies to communicate to us what it may or may not need might be an opportunity to aid in our healing.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that, Sandra. Don't you guys like her feels? I do. She speaks so passionately and so poetically, but it's also like it's real. So I appreciate that. Do we have any other comments or questions? I know that some of you guys were asking about the diet and ingredients, and if we had any tasty foods outside of the foods that were mentioned.
And we actually had a specific question about wine, if you want.
Okay.
So
what was the question?
Just Raina Smith put wine in moderation and did the emoji, the thinking emoji.
I wish I was surprised that it came from her. But as I mentioned before, 150 milliliters. How many ounces is that? Question mark. But that is your goal. And then the type of wine would be a red wine. So 150 milliliters, let's put it in Google, do that daily. I think that's your answer. That's the moderation.
Okay, so 150 milliliters looks to be 5 fluid ounces.
Okay.
Thank you, Morgan. So, yep, 180 is 6 ounces. So 6 ounces, that's like 3/4 of a cup. So, okay, that's like a little taste to wet the palate. Alicia says that 5 ounces is 1 glass.
Meaning 3/4 of a cup, because people have different size glasses.
That's very true. And when we say a cup, we mean that measuring cup that you have in your cover. That's true. I'm not gonna lie, I got my little glass sitting next to me. But so there's different kinds of red wine. Are there any
in particular
sommeliers here? No Olivia Pope glasses, Alicia says. So
you have to find a wine that's high in polyphenols. So I'll put that in the chat. So I'm not a wine connoisseur, but I can definitely get a list to provide. But what we're aiming for is that ingredient. Okay, somebody also said black owned. Yes. So rich in blackness and then rich in polyphenols. Phenols.
Yeah. Yes. And Reese said actually the red blend from the Mike McBride sisters, which is they're 2 Black sisters that own their own company. And I would actually offer and say, try red blends first. I think blends can help you find your taste. And again, it's an acquired taste. Most of these things are an acquired taste. When we were children, we may have ate like children and preferred chicken nuggets and French fries. But as we mature, we find the finer things in life, and we find that we actually really enjoy Brussels sprouts, or really enjoy. Yes, we do. Malbec. So we have a question.
Okay.
And it's asking about liquor, and I think it's a great question. And they spoke of one in particular, but I'm going to ask you first, Dr. Ford. Do you know about liquor? If you're going to have a drink, is it more advised to have one type of liquor over another?
Like, are you like a dark with a light, or just stick with dark?
No, I'm saying specifically, and I can speak to it. I
don't know what we're asking.
If you'd like. So I think that, so look to see and Google, you can Google and research what is in what you're consuming. So the liquor that you're choosing, is it derived from potatoes? Is it derived from wheat? Is it derived from corn? Because those are type of liquors that you definitely want to be cautious of and limit and maybe stay away from, because Dr. J already told us that those are not foods that we want to consume in excess or even regularly. And so when we're choosing a liquor, potentially choose a liquor that is derived from a fruit or a vegetable even, or some kind of plant-based derivative. And when we do that, also consider the sugar content. Dr. J did tell us that we want to limit our sugar because sugar has a direct correlation to our inflammation. And so even if it comes from grapes, like wine, or like Ciroc. Ciroc is a vodka that comes strictly from grapes, or even Hennessy. Henny comes from grapes. But we want to consider how much sugar content is in that and be very cognizant of that when we consume. And so also tequila is a choice that is, I would say it's plant derived. So tequila is derived from, what is the word? It starts with an A. It's escaping me right now. Dr.
Agave.
Agave. Thank you, Morgan. 937 represent Dr. Jivens. Agave, and agave is from the earth. It's a plant. And so there's gold and silver options there. Of course, tequila is something that you want to be very cognizant in when you consume it, because it can be more potent than others. But it is plant derived, and you may want to, if you're going to consume alcohol or liquor, that's something that you might want to choose, as opposed to something that, again, comes from a potato or corn or wheat. So thank you for that question.
I am shocked that you knew all of this. That's really good. Any other?
Don't judge me.
Any other important questions like this? I don't want to take up everybody's evening. I have to get this off my screen because I don't know what happened. Give me 1 second. Okay. On behalf of Our Generational Health and her brand, I'd like to say thank you for taking your time to join us, to converse with us. Thank you for your suggestions and your questions. I know this presentation was probably loaded, but if nothing else, it will warm our heart if you just took away one thing. I encourage you all to stay tuned. Next month in January, date unknown at this point, we'll be discussing the importance of wellness, not to be confused with health, but wellness, overall wellness. That'll be presented by myself and Tiandra, who has been navigating the conversation in the group chat. February, we'll be talking about how health is our right, and we'll be diving into the medical apartheid book and having a roundtable talk with different members of the organization. If you missed the past talks, we do have recordings posted on our YouTube page. You can access that through our website at ourgenhealth.org. Follow us on Instagram at ourgenhealth. Don't yet have a Facebook. And then, of course, contact us for questions or topic suggestions at ourgenerationalhealth@gmail.com. Last but not least, it is our goal to expand and try to reach as many people as possible. But with this, we do need that green thing. So if you would like to become a sponsor or donate, please help us grow to reach other people. You can also do so at ourgenhealth, that's a typo right there, .org.